Yeah, what's good? The 12 tribes of Israel chart is bullshit. The 12 tribes of Israel chart that says the nations of Israel, all 12 nations of Israel, is bullshit. You know, some of it is true, but some of it is false. This is what I'm talking about. I'm looking at a picture of it right now of the 12 tribes of Israel chart. The tribe of Judah, it says it's Black Americans. Tribe of Benjamin, they say West Indian blacks. The tribe of Levi, Haitians. The tribe of Ephraim, Puerto Ricans. Tribe of Manasseh, it says Cubans. Tribe of Simeon, Dominicans. Then it says tribe of Gad, Native American Indians. Tribe of Reuben, Seminole Indians. Tribe of Asher, Colombians and Uruguayans. Tribe of Issachar, Mexicans. Tribe of Naphtali, Argentina. And some of that is false. Some of that is false. I agree with that most Black Americans come from the tribe of Judah. And the reason I believe that is because in today's age, Black Americans are the head, the face of the African diaspora. Black Americans are indeed the face of the African diaspora. Black Americans, compared to all the other blacks in the world, we've achieved the most. We've invented more technology than all the other black people in the world. We have a stronger cultural influence than all the other black people in the world. We have more of an intense history of racism and oppression than all the other black people of the world. And throughout the world, when you think of a black person, the first image that comes to your mind is a Black American. So Black Americans, we are the face of Black people worldwide. And that's because the majority of Black Americans come from the tribe of Judah. The tribe of Judah is the head of Israel. Yahweh Shai, also known as Jesus, he came from the tribe of Judah. The tribe of Judah is the closest to the Most High. It's the head of Israel. So I believe Judah is part of the tribe. I believe Black Americans do come from the tribe of Judah, most of us. And it also says the 12 tribes of Israel also says believe they're Black people. They have a very similar history as Black Americans. um, West Indian blacks. They were brought to the Caribbean and the West Indies from Africa, the west coast of Africa. So they come from the west coast of Africa, just like Black Americans do. So, Caribbean blacks, West Indian blacks, they're Israelites as well. So it could be believable that a large chunk of West Indian blacks come from the tribe of Benjamin, you know, tribe of Levi. It says on the 12 tribe chart, tribe of Levi are Haitians. That's believable. Haitians are black people. Haitians were brought as slaves from West Africa to the new land, you know. So they're Israelites. They're black people of African descent. Black people of West African descent are Israelites. So it's believable that Haitians could come from the tribe of Levi. Okay. But here is when things get a little fishy in the 12 tribes chart. Tribe of Ephraim. It says the tribe of Ephraim are Puerto Ricans. That's when things get a little fishy. I do know a large chunk of Puerto Ricans are of West African descent. You know, Puerto Rico was a part of the slave trade, and a lot of West African slaves were transported to Puerto Rico, but majority of Puerto Ricans are not of predominantly West African descent. Only a small percentage of Puerto Ricans are of predominantly West African, aka Hebrew descent. The slaves that are brought, you have to understand the West African slaves that are brought overseas to the New World, those were Hebrews, you know. So in today's age, the average Puerto Rican you see walking around, it's not a black man, it's not a black woman. They might have some black blood in them, but the majority of the blood running through most Puerto Ricans' veins is not of majority Hebrew descent. Hebrews are blacks. You see a Puerto Rican walking around today, a lot of them be looking like straight up white people. Most Puerto Ricans, a lot of Puerto Ricans do have black blood. Some Puerto Ricans are black like me, but most of them are not of predominantly black Hebrew descent. Most of them are not of predominantly. A lot of Puerto Ricans, most Puerto Ricans nowadays have more Spaniard blood. Most Puerto Ricans today have more Spaniard blood than they do Hebrew black blood. And Spaniards are Europeans. Europeans are not bloodline Israelites. Europeans are not bloodline Israelites. But some Puerto Ricans are Israelites. Some Puerto Ricans are Israelites. Not all of them, maybe not even most of them. but some Puerto Ricans are Israelites, and I'll be in denial if I said none of them were Israelites, because some Puerto Ricans are Israelites, because you have to remember the history of Puerto Rico, slaves, Hebrew West African Hebrew slaves were sent to Puerto Rico. So some of them are bloodline Israelites, but I'm saying most of them are not. Some of them are, but most of them are not. And and it also says on this 12 tribes chart that people from Argentina, it has Argentina on the fucking 12 tribes chart. That's extremely false. People from Argentina today, people from Argentina are of predominantly European descent. People from Argentina, most people from Argentina are not Israelites. You know, most people from Argentina are of predominantly European descent. Um, the ancestors of people from Argentina came from Spain. Spaniards are Europeans. People from Spain are not Israelites. And another country where a lot of people from Argentina descend from is Italy. Italians are not Israelites. A lot of Argentina people are of Italian descent. Italians are not Israelites. Italians come from the Roman Empire. You know, Italy is the heart of Rome. Italy is the heart of the Roman Empire. Do you guys know anything about the Romans? The Romans were the invaders of Israel. The Romans were the ones who invaded Israel, took over Israel, and fled the Israelites into mainland Africa. The Romans were the ones who invaded Israel and took our land from us. So basically, if you say people from Argentina are Israelites, you're basically saying that Romans are bloodline Israelites, because a lot of people from Argentina originally come from Italy. Italians are Romans. So you're basically saying the 12 tribes chart is basically saying Romans, the invaders of Israel, Romans are bloodline Israelites. And that's fucking bullshit. Kind of the same situation with Mexicans. They put Mexicans on the 12 tribes chart, and that's false. Most Mexicans nowadays are of predominantly Spaniard descent. Most Mexicans in today's age are of predominantly Spaniard descent. Spaniards are Europeans. Europeans are not bloodline Israelites. White people are not bloodline Israelites. Come on now. I'm not saying no Mexican, not one Mexican is an Israelite. You know, there are a small percentage of Mexicans that are Israelites, because there are some Mexicans who are of African descent, slaves from West Africa, Hebrew slaves from West Africa were transported to Mexico as slaves. So a small percentage of Mexicans are Israelites. But I'm saying most of them are not Israelites. Most Mexicans are of predominantly Spanish European descent. And another thing that I'm not feeling about this 12 tribes of Israel chart is that they put Native Americans on this chart. Since when were since when were Native Americans Israelites? You know, what historical connection do Native Americans have with Israel? You know, you have to understand the Israelites were black people with nappy hair, with afros, black skin. Native Americans don't show any physical signs that they are part black. You know, you look at an average Native American, they don't look anything like a black man. They have fucking straight hair. Israelites didn't have straight hair. You know, Israelites didn't look anything like Native Americans. Israelites, the original Israelites who lived in Israel were black people. And for the most part, I only believe black people of West African and Central African descent are bloodline Israelites. You know, this is a verse from the Bible from the book of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 9. The book of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 9. And it says, "You will be hated by all nations for my name's sake." Let me repeat that. You will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And that Bible verse is referring to the bloodline Israelites, the nation of Israel. It says, "You will be hated by all nations for my name's sake." The whole world will hate on Israel. Basically, that's what that Bible verse means. The whole world will hate on Israel. So the Israelites, according to the Bible, the Israelites, the bloodline Israelites, are hated by all nations. There's only one group of people that are hated by all nations, and that's black people. Black people of African descent, black people of West African descent are the only people in the world who are hated by all nations. Native Americans. Since when were Native Americans hated by all nations? Native Americans are not hated by all nations. That's how you know Native Americans are not Israelites. Only black people of West African descent are hated by all nations. That's because the real Israelites are black people of West African descent. So this 12 tribes chart, a lot of this is false. All right, y'all.